relapsing again and then surrendering. And this is how my recovery journey went. It wasn't a straight road. It wasn't a straight path to recovery. It was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of false starts, a lot of beginnings, a lot of relapsing, a lot of surrendering. These are the 3 hidden stages of addiction that you may or may not be aware of. I'm going to state them plainly. The first is the darkness stage, the ignorance stage, being unaware that we have an addiction or that we have a problem. This is the honeymoon phase with our substance of choice or our addiction of choice. The second stage is awareness of our addiction, but being unconcerned. This generally happens after the first couple of years when we settle into our addictions. We become aware that we might have a problem. We're unfazed by it. It doesn't cause an alarm. It doesn't cause us any concern, and we don't think we need any help. But we're aware of it. We're aware of what we're doing, and we're not unconscious at this stage where we just don't think we need any help. Finally, the third hidden stage is surrendering. Surrendering to our drug of choice, surrendering to our substance of choice, surrendering to our addiction. Now, this stage isn't the worst stage of all, but not for the reasons you think. But I'm going to get into that later. First, let's talk about the first stage, unawareness, or being stuck in the darkness, being in ignorance. This usually happens maybe first 6 months to a year. We're doing a routine, but we're not aware that it's a problem. We're not aware of exactly what we're doing. We don't understand the risks or the harms or the long-term effects that it's going to have, or we're unaware. This could happen when we're either young or we just don't know what we're doing. We're put into a situation, peer pressured into doing whatever. We're just going with the flow. So we're unaware that we have a problem, and we just think it's a normal day. It's a normal day or normal activity or a normal part of life. But this is a trick, because this is when the substances or the addiction hooks its tendrils into us to siphon our energy over our lifespan. So this leads into the second hidden stage of addiction that we may be unaware of, and that's the awareness stage, but being unconcerned. This is the stage where we've grown into our addiction, and we might be aware of what we're doing. We might be aware of the pattern of use, pattern of behavior. It might be impacting our bank account. It might be impacting our relationships on a superficial level. And we might even be noticing some personality changes in ourselves. We might be noticing our physical changes. We're adapting to the substances. We're adapting to our addiction. It's more than just it's a normal part of our lives, but we're understanding that our life now, compared to what it was before we started the substance or the addiction or the alcohol, is different than what it was. So we're noticing some changes. We're becoming aware, but we're unconcerned. We're not fazed by it being a problem. And an example of this could be, say you're doing some drugs on the weekend and you're at a party and you have a good friend there, and you end up happening to you're doing some drugs in front of them that you normally would do with other buddies, and this friend mentions something to you about the long-term effects of this drug or this substance or this behavior or addiction, and the thought runs through your head, but it bounces off. You put up resistance because you're not quite understanding what he's saying. You never thought of it that way. You never thought that it might be a bad thing, that what you're doing is a bad thing, or it could lead to long-term harm. But this friend is just looking out for you and trying to make you aware of the substances or the addiction or the negative pitfalls that you could be stumbling into going forward with this addiction. But you're not aware of it, so it just washes off of you and you continue doing the substance. The third hidden phase is surrendering. Surrendering to the addiction, surrendering to our addictions. Now, this phase is interesting because these phases aren't necessarily linear, okay? These phases aren't linear in a step-by-step fashion. You could have one before the other. The surrendering phase could come before the aware phase, or it could come after the recovery phase, and then the relapse phase, and then the surrendering phase, and then the awareness phase, and then relapsing again, and then surrendering. And this is how my recovery journey went. It wasn't a straight road. It wasn't a straight path to recovery. It was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of false starts, a lot of beginnings, a lot of relapsing, a lot of surrendering. I was severely addicted to alcohol and substances. I was struggling with myself. I was battling. And I remember, with the self-talk that was going on during this phase of the addiction cycle, I gave in. I gave in to the drugs and the alcohol and the substances and the addiction. Up until that point, I was battling it. I was trying to get sober. I would get sober for 4, 5, 6 weeks at a time, relapse, go out for a couple of months, come back, get sober again. And I did this for 6-7 years, right? So eventually in those 6 years, I remember the last two years of those 6 years, I gave in and I said, you know what? I surrender. I'm an addict. I'm an addict. I'm going to be an addict to the end of my life. And the drugs and alcohol are probably going to kill me. And I just surrendered to that fate. I thought that was going to be the end of me. That was my destination, my endpoint in life. And I surrendered and I accepted it. And I said, okay, you know what? Then I'm just going to become a true addict. And then I started using pretty well every day. I went from partying on the weekends. Okay, it started partying once a month, then once every 2 weeks, then once every 3 days, then going for 4 or 5 days straight, sleeping for 2 days, and then going back at it. And it was just the days that I had off in between just shrunk compared to the days that I was using. And I basically became a daily user at that point because half of the week I was high or I was drunk or I was inebriated. And at that point, I remember when I gave in, I allowed myself to just go full tilt into what I was doing, and I stopped resisting. But deep down inside, I wanted help. And this is why the surrendering stage is a good point to be in. It wasn't until I surrendered to my addiction that I was able to overcome it down the line. I would say that surrendering to it paved the way to recovery because surrendering to my addiction allowed me to reach a rock bottom. When I was trying to get help on my own, relapsing, recovering, getting sober and relapsing, it was like I wasn't letting myself fall far enough. I wasn't letting myself reach rock bottom. But when I surrendered to the drug just took me down, boom. When I surrendered to the addiction, it just took me right down. So I wasn't going back up anymore. I was just like this. Once I did that, I reached a breaking point and I surrendered myself to God. I surrendered my ego. I lowered my pride. I said, God, please help me. I can't help myself. I prayed to God for help because I couldn't help myself. I had surrendered to the alcohol, the substances, the addiction. I didn't think I could help myself. And eventually I reached such a point of malcontent, just at such a depressing point. I thought that I was reaching death's door. And I finally asked for help from a family member. I admitted I had a problem. I brought the addiction out of the darkness, out of the shadow, into the light. Darkness covers our addiction. So addictions thrive in darkness. And once I got that addiction out into the light, well, the addiction started to lose its hold on me. It lost its power. And being out in the light, I was able to overcome it. With God's grace and with God's help and with God's regenerating of my spirit, I was able to overcome it. But I had to bring that addiction out into the light. A lot of the hidden stages of our addiction, we keep to ourselves and people might not even know. Like I remember talking to a couple of my family members after I checked myself into an addiction rehab program. And they were surprised when they got the call and I'm telling them where I was, what I was doing, what happened. They never would have guessed. They never thought that I was going through this severe of a problem because I had kept my addiction to myself in darkness so that it could fester. My addiction isolated me because the addiction took over. It wanted to consume me. And the only way it could consume me is by keeping me away from my loved ones, by keeping me in the dark so that it could thrive, because it's in the darkness that our addictions thrive. These are the 3 hidden stages of addiction that you may or may not be aware of, and I'm going to recap them real quick. The first stage of addiction is being unaware, being in ignorance, being in the dark. So we're using substances, we're using alcohol, we're addicted to something, but we're unaware that it's a problem. We're unaware that we're entering into an addiction cycle. This could be the first 6 months to a year of substance use or heavy alcohol use or gambling problem or sex or porn, whatever the addiction is. We're unaware that it's a problem and that we're even doing something that could lead to our downfall down the road. The second phase is we're unconcerned. People might be telling us that, hey, we're heading down a bad path, or maybe we should reconsider what we're doing. And we have some questions in ourselves about what we're doing, or we're noticing some changes and we're aware of what we're doing, that it's wrong, but we're not concerned by it. We think that we can handle it. We think that nothing bad's going to happen to us, that whatever happens to other people that we hear on the news, it's not going to happen to us, right? We're Superman. Our egos are going to overcome the world. So nothing bad's going to come from our addiction. We're aware, but we're unconcerned. And then the third hidden stage is surrendering. The surrendering stage, when we surrender to our addiction, We give in to our addiction. We accept the fact that, yeah, we are addicted, but this is our life now. This is how we're living. And we want to get better deep down inside ourselves, but we're unsure how to get better. We're unsure what to do to get better. And we're just surrendering to the drug and the substance and the alcohol and the addiction because that's what we know best. That's what we're accustomed to. But this is a good phase to be in, because when we surrender to the alcohol, the substance, the addiction, it leads us to our rock bottom. Now, unfortunately, rock bottom could be death for many of us, but for many others of us, rock bottom is our foundation, which we build the rest of our life upon, right? So that's why I say the third phase, surrendering to our addiction, is the best phase to be in if we're in the cycle of addiction, because that's the end of the road. That's the end of the line of the cycle of addiction, is surrendering. Once we surrender to our addictions, we pave the way to a rock bottom to build the foundation of the rest of our life. If you like what I'm talking about, give me a like and subscribe, and check out this video for more.